Japan's Deputy Prime Minister Taro also said this week that Japan would come to the defense of Taiwan in the case of a Chinese attack on Taiwan. Will this help deter China from attacking Taiwan? And how would this affect the military balance across the Taiwan-Strait? Well, today I speak with a top defense and wargaming expert in Taiwan, Professor Alexander Huang of Danjiang University's Graduate Institute of International Affairs and Strategic Studies. Now, Professor Huang, it's great to be able to speak with you about this very important issue. It's very interesting to see Japan come out and speak recently about helping to defend Taiwan. What do you make of this? Why are they speaking out at this time?
I think Japan has always maintained a quite focused on the situation surrounding Taiwan, because Taiwan is in the way of all Japan's sea lanes of communication for Japan's maritime-based imports. It is very important for Japan to make sure that the surrounding area near Taiwan will not be disturbed. That has been known for a long time. However, the recent more assertive actions by the People's Liberation Army of the People's Republic had raised the eyebrow and alert in Japan that China might take military actions against Taiwan, and that will definitely disturb Japan's economic supply line. But for his remarks on defending Taiwan, I would rather look at it from the angle that Japan urged the United States would focus more on Taiwan and would help Taiwan to defend itself. I do not believe that that remark would imply that Japan will use its self-defense force to be involved in any military conflict across the Taiwan Strait.
There are some news reports saying that a Chinese attack Taiwan would be a threat to Japan's security as well, so they could consider using their military forces to get involved. You don't think that's the case?
Of course, an invasion on Taiwan by China would definitely threaten the Japanese national security as well as its sea lanes of communication. But that does not, necessarily involve Japanese force in the direct exchange of fire with the Chinese armed forces. The reason why is that Japan has a very conservative past, and the political and social fabric has not come to the stage to support a Japanese offensive actions outside of Japan. For that particular reason, that the Japanese, after many years of efforts by former Minister Shinzo Abe, that Japan can only participate under the name of Security Alliance to provide American forces logistic and other intelligence information support, but not necessarily get involved in war fighting.
Why do you think Japan is coming out at this time? Do you think that the threat of a Chinese attack is greater than ever before, and that they're getting nervous about this as well?
Of course, we know that in Japanese politics, there is a very wide spectrum. The deputy minister and the minister of defense in Japan currently are considered the far right of the spectrum. They had always promote the idea that Japan needs to be a normal country, and Japan needs to change its self-defense forces to national forces or rebuild their military capability. But that kind of voice does not represent that the entire Japanese Diet or Congress would support such kind of idea. And number two is that Japan has been very cautious whenever they saw American changing their policy. So they would not like to be left behind. When they saw that the United States is now promoting a closer security collaboration with Taiwan, so they jump out. They do not want to be left behind. They wanted to show their support of American policy.
Do you think that the US and Japan coming together in this way will be a greater deterrent for Beijing to not attack Taiwan?
The short answer is no.
No?
I do not believe that Beijing would be deterred by the language that from a deputy minister of defense in Japan. But if we zoom out to look at a wider and stronger US-Japan security alliance vis-a-vis the Chinese assertiveness, I would say that these kind of verbal expression would give a high alert to the people and war planners in Beijing, and would probably prompt even a higher nationalism within China. It may not bring anything good to the situation that has been already very tense in the Taiwan-Strait. It might show some kind of policy direction, but it may not be helpful for the security and the stability in the region. Personally, I would say that if Japan can do more and speak less, that would be much better.
Well, what do you think would deter China from attacking Taiwan?
I would use the word prevent. To prevent a Chinese intention is much more important to deter a Chinese action. To deter Chinese action is based on Taiwan's own ability to defend itself. It's based on the US-Taiwan security cooperation. It depends on how soon and how fast that the United States can modernize its current forces in the Indo-Pacific region. And it also depends on how the Americans are working with their regional allies to form a even more stronger alliance and sending the correct signal to the policy decision makers in Beijing. I think that's a coalition of all efforts are the only way to deter a Chinese decision to use force against Taiwan.
Well, we've been seeing a lot of warplanes coming into Taiwan's ADIZ, and relations between Taiwan and China are very tense. So do you think that an attack by China is possible within a year or two?
Well, I need to quote the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of the United States, General Milley. He testified in the Congress recently, saying that he personally do not believe that the Chinese will use force against Taiwan in the next year or two. But I worry more about what he didn't say to the Congress, because we understand that the former and the current commander of the United States Indo-Pacific Command had suggested that the Chinese might use force against Taiwan in the next 6 years. So if we combine these two together, the Chinese attack on Taiwan is not imminent, but it's not too far away. So for all of us in Taiwan, we need to be very vigilant and be very careful and try to think of any possible military scenario in advance as soon as possible.
So is Taiwan doing that?
I cross my fingers and hope so.
So I'm also curious, what do you think of Xi Jinping's remarks on the 100th anniversary of the, Chinese Communist Party? Do they seem more belligerent? What can you infer from his remarks about Taiwan and also not being bullied or oppressed by foreigners?
If we compare his speech to the General Secretary of the former Soviet Union Communist Party, I would say Xi Jinping had been very polite. He spoke for only
Really?
72 minutes. But the theme of his speech on July 1, in the occasion of the centennial of the Chinese Communist Party, the theme is targeting a domestic audience. It's to celebrate their own party birthday. It was not a foreign policy speech, and it was not a Taiwan policy speech. Xi Jinping wanted to paint a picture that China is not only wealthy today, but also strong enough to speak their words and present their intention. I would say that the democracies around Indo-Pacific region should look at his speech seriously, but not terribly worried about that kind of remarks. I do not believe that China wanted to show its teeth at this moment. We need to remember that there will be a Winter Olympics in February next year, and Xi Jinping will try to get reselected in the 20th Party's Congress in the fall next year. So China has many things at stake, and their plate is pretty much full as well. So I do not believe that Xi Jinping in any way in the July 1 speech tried to hint that that China is ready to fight a war against any foreign power. And he sent out the warning message, of course, to the outside audience, but primarily his goal was to prompt the confidence and the nationalism within the Chinese territory.
Well, we also see that the United States is actually trying to gather the Group of Seven and a lot of its allies, including Japan, to express concern about the Taiwan Strait. So do you think the US is getting the support it needs to prevent China from attacking Taiwan?
I would say that in the early stage, all friends and allies of the United States wanted to give Joe Biden a kind of honeymoon or a kind of respect, especially after experiencing a 4 year of Trump shock.
Right.
So all the America or President Biden was able to promote their agenda and ask their language be put into almost every joint declaration or press statement based on the American proposed agenda. But that I consider that as phase one. And there will be phase two. The phase two is that European allies and also friends in the Asia Pacific, after the first 6 months of Joe Biden, will sit back and think about their own national security and national interests. We have already witnessed that German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the French President had already had a video summit with President Xi Jinping of China. And Beijing is ready for a full round around the world of party leadership conference. I think European Union wanted to have their own independent foreign policy. And I believe that Japan, Korea, the Philippines, and all the countries in Southeast Asia, they all have their own national interests. They will, after the first 6 months of Joe Biden, I think the United States will now come back to each one of the country and talk about serious business. And by then, there will be a true test of the coalition of democracies that administered or promoted by President Joe Biden.
You know, we here in Taiwan definitely know the threat of a Chinese attack. It would change Taiwan's fate, right, as a democracy. But what about the region and the world if China took over Taiwan, like it is with Hong Kong? How would that affect the region? How would that affect people, Europe, you know, the rest of the world order?
Well, yeah, if Taiwan falls into the Chinese hand, that means that there will be no longer the first island chain, because Taiwan is situated in the center point of the island chain. Should China get Taiwan, then China can put their ballistic missiles, their nuclear submarines, and their new aircraft carriers in the naval bases in Taiwan, and threaten not only the sea lanes of communications to Northeast Asia, but also the security situation in the entire Western Pacific. So if Taiwan get lost into the Chinese hand, that will be a big security challenge for the United States and all the democratic institutions in the Indo-Pacific region.
So they have good reason to defend Taiwan.
They have a good reason to help Taiwan to defend itself. I do not believe that any foreign force will have a direct involvement of war fighting should there be a military operation across the Taiwan-Strait. Number one, because Taiwan does not have any diplomatic relationship with anyone in the Indo-Pacific region. Number two, Taiwan did not have any joint training or joint exercises with any of the forces nearby. So it could not be a coalition warfighting or alliance military operation. It cannot be done without joint training and joint exercises.
But do you believe that the US will come to help defend Taiwan if China attacks Taiwan?
Yes, the United States will help Taiwan within 12 hours. They will issue very strong statements to support Taiwan and to blame China's action. Probably within 72 hours, the United States will dispatch their military assets to the vicinity around Taiwan, but I'm not sure whether they will get involved directly. I don't believe that this kind of high risk, if Taiwan and the United States, without any prior planning, without any joint exercises, and try to conduct independent, separate military operations in the very tiny airspace and maritime area, that could be a big risk for our own forces and for the American forces in the region. So we can always have a beautiful slogan. We can always hope that the American involvement will deter China, but it is much complicated scenario for everyone in uniform, that this is not an easy task. It is life and death of our men in uniform.
So, Professor Huang, are you worried about a war in the coming years?
Well, I worried about the wisdom of our own politicians, if I may say this, because to prevent a war, to maintain peace and stability, is not based on military buildup. It also based on smart policy. We know that the United States is the only country that can provide Taiwan with necessary and timely support, but we should not forget that to keep a manageable cross-strait relations, it's also our responsibility. At least there is a 50% responsibility on our shoulder that we need to be very vigilant and be very mindful about this responsibility.
Mm. Well, Professor, thank you so much for your time. It's been insightful speaking with you about the situation across the Taiwan Strait with US and Japan and China.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I would not be too honest to respond to your inquiry.
We always appreciate your honest thoughts, Professor.
Okay,
Thank you.